"Mom's acting strange," my 16-year-old son Ethan whispered, pulling me aside after dinner. "She's been mixing pills in Dad's coffee for weeks." I thought he was being dramatic until I saw the evidence myself. What I discovered about my mother-in-law wasn't just shocking, it completely shattered everything I thought I knew about the woman who'd been living in our house for 6 months. The plan was supposed to be temporary. When my husband Jake's mother, Vivian, broke her hip last spring during what she called her morning constitutional around her neighborhood in Phoenix, we all agreed she'd come stay with us in Sacramento, just until she could walk again. 6 weeks, maybe 8 at the most. It seemed like the right thing to do, the only thing to do really. Jake is an only child. I work from home as a freelance graphic designer, and we have the space a converted garage apartment that's private but connected to our main house. I'm 30 years old, and I've been married to Jake for 12 years. We got married young, right out of high school, which sounds crazy now but felt right at the time. We've built a good life together in our quiet suburban neighborhood where the biggest drama is usually someone's sprinklers hitting their neighbor's car. I handle most of the household management because my work schedule is flexible, while Jake works as a project manager at a software development company downtown. Vivian had always been what Jake diplomatically called particular. That's the word he used, and I went with it because it sounded so much kinder than the words that actually came to mind: controlling, demanding, impossible to please. She had strong opinions about absolutely everything. How I folded the fitted sheets, what brand of cereal we bought for the kids, why I let Ethan stay up past 9 on school nights even though he's 16 and perfectly capable of managing his own sleep schedule, why we didn't attend church regularly, and why I hadn't yet convinced Jake to ask for a promotion he didn't even want. But she was 73 and healing from a major surgery, so I bit my tongue and reminded myself daily that this arrangement was temporary. 6 weeks, 8 at most. I could handle anyone for 8 weeks, even someone who reorganized my spice cabinet to make it more efficient and left passive-aggressive notes about the proper way to load a dishwasher. Jake handled his mother the way he handled most uncomfortable situations in his life, by staying exceptionally busy at work and letting me manage whatever needed managing at home. It's not that he's a bad husband or father, he's just someone who naturally gravitates toward avoiding conflict, and he's naturally terrible at navigating family drama. She means well, he'd say whenever I'd carefully hint that Vivian was being particularly difficult that day. "She's just worried about everyone. You know how mothers get." I knew how mothers got because I am one. We have 2 kids, Ethan, who's 16 and sharp as a tack, and his younger sister Chloe, who just turned 13 and is navigating the complicated waters of middle school with about as much grace as you'd expect. They're good kids, really good kids, but having their grandmother move indefinitely shifted the household dynamics in ways none of us were quite prepared for. Ethan was the one who noticed things first. He's observant in that particular way that teenagers are when they're looking for reasons to be annoyed by the adults around them, but also genuinely perceptive about people and situations. Chloe, on the other hand, mostly dealt with her grandmother's presence by disappearing into her room with her headphones on, emerging only for meals and the occasional bathroom break. But Ethan paid attention to everything happening around him. The coffee routine started about 3 weeks after Vivian moved in. Every morning around 6 o'clock, she would shuffle into our kitchen right when Jake was making his daily cup of coffee. At first, she would just sit at the kitchen island and make small talk, asking about his work projects, commenting on the weather, mentioning something she'd seen on the news the night before. Normal grandmother conversation, nothing unusual. But then she started insisting on helping. She said it made her feel useful during a time when she felt like she couldn't contribute much to the household. She wanted to pour the cream, add exactly 2 teaspoons of sugar, and stir it just the way Jake liked it. Jake seemed genuinely touched by the gesture, and honestly, so was I. After weeks of tension about everything else, the way I organized the linen closet, my unhealthy reliance on processed foods, my permissive parenting style, here was finally something harmonious between us. See, Jake would tell me as he headed off to work with his perfectly prepared coffee in hand, She's really trying to be helpful. I think she's starting to feel more comfortable here. I thought it was sweet too, genuinely sweet. After dealing with criticism about nearly every aspect of how I ran our household, watching Vivian take care of her son in this small, maternal way felt like a breakthrough. Maybe we were finally finding our rhythm as a 3-generation household. Maybe the next few weeks would be easier than the first few had been. Jake actually started looking forward to those few minutes with his mother each morning before work. He'd come downstairs already dressed, and she'd be waiting for him in the kitchen, ready to help with his coffee. They'd chat quietly while she prepared it, and he'd give her a kiss on the cheek before grabbing his laptop bag and heading out the door. It became their special routine, their bonding time. I started sleeping in a little later because I knew she had the morning coffee handled. My work schedule is flexible since I design marketing materials for small businesses, and I do most of my focused work during school hours anyway. So I'd stay in bed until around 7, listening to the quiet murmur of Jake and Vivian's conversation downstairs, feeling grateful that they'd found something positive to share. Everything felt normal, manageable, like we'd finally found our groove and the remaining weeks of her stay would pass peacefully. I even started thinking that maybe we'd been too quick to set such a firm timeline. If Vivian was happy here, and if Jake was enjoying the extra time with his mother, perhaps we could be flexible about her recovery period. The kids seemed to be adjusting too. Ethan had stopped making sarcastic comments about his grandmother's helpful suggestions about his homework routine, and Chloe had even started joining us for dinner more regularly instead of asking to eat in her room. We were becoming a family unit that included Vivian, not just a family that was temporarily housing her. Our neighborhood in Sacramento is the kind of place where everyone knows each other but respects boundaries. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained lawns, the occasional block party, kids riding bikes until the streetlights come on. It's peaceful and predictable, which is exactly what Jake and I wanted when we bought our house here 8 years ago. We wanted stability for our kids, good schools, and a community where they could grow up safely. Vivian seemed to appreciate the neighborhood too. She'd sit on our front porch in the evenings, waving to neighbors as they walked their dogs or returned from work. She complimented our landscaping, said our house was much nicer than she'd expected, mentioned that she could see why we'd chosen to settle here. These were the most positive things I'd heard her say since she'd arrived, and I was starting to feel genuinely optimistic about the situation. My work was going well too. I had several ongoing projects with local businesses, a new logo design for a family restaurant, a complete brand package for a boutique fitness studio, marketing materials for a real estate agent who was building her client base. Working from home while managing a household that included 3 generations had its challenges, but I was making it work. I'd set up my office in what used to be our formal dining room, and I could work while keeping an eye on things throughout the day. Vivian would often comment on my work setup. She'd ask what I was designing, look over my shoulder while I worked, make suggestions about color choices or font selections. Some of her input was actually helpful. She had a good eye for design, something I hadn't expected. She'd worked as a secretary for an insurance company for 40 years before retiring, so she understood business communication and professional presentation. "You're very talented," she told me one afternoon as I was working on a logo concept. "Jake never mentioned how creative you are." It was such a genuine compliment, delivered without any backhanded criticism attached, that I actually felt emotional about it. Maybe she was finally seeing me as something other than the woman who'd stolen her son and failed to raise her grandchildren properly. The weeks were passing more smoothly than I dared hope. Vivian's physical therapy was going well. She was walking with just a cane now instead of the walker she'd needed when she first arrived. Her doctor was pleased with her progress, and we were all talking tentatively about her return to Phoenix, though no one was pushing for a specific date anymore. That's when the small things started happening, things so minor that I almost didn't notice them at first, things that seemed insignificant in isolation but started forming a pattern that made me uncomfortable in a way I couldn't quite articulate. Jake started having trouble sleeping. He'd always been someone who fell asleep easily and slept soundly through the night, but suddenly he was tossing and turning, getting up frequently to use the bathroom, complaining about feeling restless. He blamed it on work stress. He had several big projects with tight deadlines, but it seemed more physical than mental. He'd fall asleep normally but then wake up repeatedly throughout the night. He also started having what he called weird dreams. Not nightmares exactly, but strange, vivid dreams that left him feeling disoriented when he woke up. Dreams where he was lost in buildings that changed layout while he was walking through them. Dreams where he was trying to complete simple tasks but couldn't make his hands work properly. Dreams where people were talking to him but their words didn't make sense. During the day, he seemed fine, tired from the poor sleep, but otherwise normal. He'd drink his morning coffee that Vivian prepared, head off to work, and function normally throughout the day. But the sleep issues were clearly wearing on him, and I was starting to worry about his health. I suggested he see a doctor, but he insisted it was just temporary stress, big projects at work. He'd say, "Once these deadlines pass, I'll sleep better." But the deadlines came and went, and the sleep problems continued. Ethan mentioned that his dad seemed off lately. Not sick exactly, but different. He's like spacey sometimes. Ethan told me one afternoon while we were doing homework together. Like yesterday, I asked him something about my bike, and he stared at me for like 10 seconds before answering. It was weird. I'd noticed similar moments. Jake would be in the middle of a conversation and suddenly seem confused, like he'd lost track of what we were talking about. Or he'd start to do something routine, load the dishwasher, check the mail, and then stop halfway through, looking puzzled about what he'd been doing. These episodes were brief and infrequent, but they were definitely happening more often than normal. I started paying closer attention to his behavior, and I realized that the confusion and disorientation seemed to be getting worse gradually. So gradually that it would have been easy to miss if I wasn't specifically watching for it. The sleep problems had been going on for about 2 weeks when Ethan pulled me aside that Tuesday evening. I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner, and Vivian had settled into the living room for her usual evening routine of watching the news and then a game show or two. Jake was upstairs taking a shower, and Chloe was in her room doing homework. Ethan appeared next to me at the sink, his expression more serious than I'd seen in months. He glanced toward the living room to make sure Vivian couldn't hear us, then moved closer to me. "Mom," he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that immediately made my stomach clench with worry. "I need to tell you something about Grandma Vivian, and you're not going to like it." The way he said it, the gravity in his voice, the careful way he looked around to ensure privacy, the certainty that what he was about to share would upset me made me stop what I was doing and give him my full attention. "What do you mean?" I asked, though part of me already didn't want to know the answer. He took a deep breath, looked toward the living room one more time, then met my eyes with an expression that was part teenage certainty and part genuine fear. "I think Grandma is putting something in Dad's coffee." I stared at my 16-year-old son, feeling like the kitchen floor had suddenly become unsteady beneath my feet. "What do you mean, putting something in Dad's coffee?" I whispered back, automatically matching his hushed tone even though I wasn't sure why we were whispering. Ethan glanced toward the living room again, where we could hear the familiar sounds of Vivian's evening news program, the dramatic music, the serious voice of the anchor, the occasional commercial jingle. She seemed completely absorbed in her routine, but Ethan still looked nervous about being overheard. "I mean exactly what I said," he replied, his voice barely audible. "She's been adding something to his coffee every morning, something that isn't cream or sugar." My mind immediately went to the most innocent explanations possible. Like what? Maybe she's adding cinnamon or vanilla extract, or Mom, no. Ethan cut me off with a shake of his head that was both frustrated and frightened. "It's not a flavoring. It's pills. She crushes up pills and mixes them into his coffee when she thinks no one is looking." The words hit me like a physical blow. Pills, crushed pills, in Jake's morning coffee. The coffee that Vivian had been so insistent on preparing herself every single morning for the past 3 weeks. The sweet, caring routine that had seemed like such a positive development in their relationship. That's. I started to say impossible, or ridiculous, or not true, but the word died in my throat because suddenly everything made horrible sense. Jake's sleep problems that had appeared out of nowhere. His confusion and disorientation during the day. The strange dreams, the moments of being spacey that Ethan had noticed, the gradual but unmistakable change in his behavior over the past few weeks. Are you sure? I asked. Though even as the question left my mouth, I realized it was a stupid thing to ask. Ethan wasn't the type of kid to make up serious accusations against his grandmother, especially not accusations this specific and disturbing. I'm sure, he said firmly. I've seen her do it 3 times now. She waits until she thinks everyone is out of the kitchen, then she takes these little white pills out of her purse, crushes them up with the back of a spoon, and stirs the powder into Dad's coffee before adding the cream and sugar. My hands were shaking now, and I had to grip the edge of the kitchen counter to steady myself. When did you first notice this? Last week. I came downstairs early because I couldn't sleep. And I was going to make myself some toast. I saw her in the kitchen, and she didn't hear me coming because I was in my socks. She had her back to me, and she was hunched over Dad's coffee mug doing something. When she heard me, she jumped and turned around really fast, like she'd been caught doing something wrong. Ethan paused, running his hand through his hair in a gesture that reminded me painfully of Jake when he was nervous. At first I thought maybe she was just stirring extra sugar or something, but her whole body language was wrong. She looked guilty, really guilty. And she was trying too hard to act normal. What did she say when she saw you? Just good morning. And asked what I was doing up so early. But she kept herself between me and Dad's coffee the whole time, like she was blocking my view of it. And she seemed really eager to get me out of the kitchen, kept suggesting I go back to bed. Or maybe grab some cereal and eat in the living room. I felt sick to my stomach. The image of Vivian secretly crushing pills into Jake's coffee while maintaining that sweet, caring grandmother facade was so disturbing that I almost couldn't process it. You said you've seen her do it 3 times? Yeah. After that first morning, I started getting up earlier and being more careful about how I came downstairs. I wanted to see if she'd do it again, or if maybe I'd misunderstood what I saw. Ethan's voice got even quieter. But she did it again the next day, and the day after that. Same routine every time. She takes these little white pills out of her purse, crushes them up, mixes the powder into Dad's coffee, then adds the regular stuff on top. What kind of pills? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. I don't know. They're small and white and round. She keeps them in a little plastic bag in her purse, not in a prescription bottle or anything, just loose pills in a baggie. Ethan looked directly at me with an expression far too serious for a 16-year-old. Mom, that's not normal medication. Storage. Normal pills come in labeled bottles with dosage instructions and warnings. These look like something she doesn't want anyone to know she has. He was right, and we both knew it. Prescription medications come in clearly labeled bottles with patient information, doctors' names, pharmacy labels, and detailed instructions. People don't typically carry loose pills in unmarked plastic bags unless they're trying to hide what those pills are or where they came from. Have you told anyone else about this? I asked. No. I thought about telling Dad, but Ethan trailed off, looking conflicted. But what? But what if she's drugging him with something that makes him confused or affects his judgment? What if telling him just makes him angry at me instead of suspicious of her? What if he doesn't believe me? Or what if he confronts her and she convinces him that I'm lying? These were disturbingly mature concerns for a teenager to have, but they were also completely valid. If Vivian was indeed giving Jake some kind of medication without his knowledge, depending on what it was, it could absolutely affect his ability to think clearly or make rational decisions, and if she'd been doing this for weeks, she'd probably developed strategies for deflecting suspicion or explaining away any concerns. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked. Ethan looked down at his hands. I guess I was hoping I was wrong. Like, maybe I'd misunderstood what I was seeing. Or maybe there was some innocent explanation I hadn't thought of. I kept waiting for Dad to get better, or for Grandma to stop doing it, or for something to happen that would prove I was being paranoid. But none of those things happened. No, if anything, Dad seems worse. More tired, more confused, more not like himself. And she's been doing it every single morning without fail. Ethan looked back up at me with eyes that seemed far older than his 16 years. Mom, I think she's been drugging Dad for 3 weeks, and I think whatever she's giving him is making him sick. The full weight of what he was saying hit me like a physical blow. My mother-in-law. The woman we'd welcomed into our home during her time of need, the woman who'd been living with our family and sharing our meals and sleeping under our roof, had been secretly drugging my husband every morning for 3 weeks. Drugging him with unknown pills that she kept hidden in her purse, pills that were causing him to have sleep problems, confusion, disorientation, and strange dreams. We have to do something, I said, though I had absolutely no idea what that something should be. I know. That's why I'm telling you. But Mom, Ethan hesitated, then continued with obvious reluctance. There's something else. My stomach dropped even further. Which I hadn't thought was possible. What else? I think. She knows that I've been watching her. What do you mean? This morning, when I came downstairs, she was already in the kitchen waiting. Not doing anything, just sitting at the island like she'd been there for a while. And when she saw me, she smiled. But it wasn't a normal smile. It was like. She was letting me know that she knew I'd been spying on her. Ethan shuddered slightly. She said good morning, but the way she said it was weird. Like she was enjoying some private joke. And then she said, "You're up early again, sweetheart. You've been getting up so early lately. I hope you're sleeping well." But the way she emphasized the words made it sound like a warning. A warning about what? Like she was telling me she knew what I'd been doing, and that I should stop. Or that maybe I should be more careful about my own sleep, if you know what I mean. I knew exactly what he meant, and the implication made my blood run cold. Was Vivian threatening to drug Ethan too if he didn't stop watching her? Was she capable of that level of calculated malice? Looking at my son's frightened but determined face, I realized that we were dealing with something far more serious than an eccentric elderly woman with boundary issues. We were dealing with someone who was willing to secretly drug a family member. For unknown reasons, someone who was threatening a teenager for noticing her behavior. Someone who had been living in our house and manipulating our family dynamics for months. "Ethan," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and steady even though everything inside me was screaming with panic and rage. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Tomorrow morning, I want you to stay in your room until after Dad leaves for work. Don't come downstairs early. Don't try to watch her. Don't give her any reason to think you're still paying attention to what she's doing." "But Mom, I'm going to handle this," I said with more confidence than I felt. "But I need to be smart about it, and I need to keep you safe while I figure out what to do. Can you do that for me? Can you just act normal and stay out of the kitchen in the mornings until I tell you otherwise?" Ethan nodded reluctantly. "What are you going to do?" That was the question I'd been dreading. Because I honestly had no idea. How do you confront someone who's been secretly drugging your husband? How do you prove something like that? How do you protect your family when the threat is coming from inside your own house? "I'm going to find out what she's giving him," I said, trying to sound more certain than I felt. "And then I'm going to stop her." As Ethan headed upstairs to his room, I stood alone in the kitchen, listening to the sounds of Vivian's television program in the living room and Jake's shower running. Upstairs, trying to process the fact that my entire understanding of our family situation had just been turned completely upside down. The sweet morning coffee routine that I'd thought was a sign of Vivian finally warming up to our family. It was actually a cover for her to drug my husband every single day. The improvement in their relationship that had made me so hopeful, it was built on deception and possibly criminal behavior. I needed evidence. I needed to know what those pills were, and I needed to know why she was giving them to Jake. But most importantly, I needed to protect my family from a woman who was clearly far more dangerous than any of us had realized. Tomorrow morning, I was going to find out exactly what Vivian had been putting in Jake's coffee. And then I was going to put a stop to it, whatever it took. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.